So today I wanted to talk about teaching listening. An interesting fact is that students spend about 50% of their time using English listening, and yet it's often an undertaught and understood skill. These days there's often an over-reliance on top-down processing where we rely on the context, and students often have difficulty decoding actual sounds and making words and meaning from that, which is the bottom-up processing. A recent study showed it had non-native speakers, upper intermediate, listening to a graded text, so they understood they knew all of the words, and they stopped it periodically and asked them to write down the 4 previous words. They did the same thing with native speakers. Native speakers were able to identify about 90% of the words, and the non-native speakers were able to identify about 60% of the words, which means that they didn't understand much more than half of the words, even though they knew all of the vocabulary. So that's really interesting, and it tells us a lot about where it would be really helpful to focus listening. The traditional way of teaching listening is giving students lots and lots of listening comprehension practice. This is really focusing on the end product. It's kind of like listening to learn. You're listening to learn new information, as opposed to learning to listen, which is teaching students how to listen. It's kind of product listening as opposed to process listening, which is a concept we often talk about with writing, but can also apply to listening. And it's kind of based on the concept that lots and lots of practice will help students improve their listening. But in reality, what's kind of happening is that you're tracking students' listening improvements without really causing or necessarily causing improvement. So, in order to do this, in order to learn to listen, in order to focus on the process, in order to cause progress rather than merely track progress, we really need to teach students how to listen, rather than just on focusing on what they're listening to. Now, ways of doing that, basically you need to build students' awareness of difficulties that they're having. So when you're checking the answers, rather than just checking the answers to the questions, have students identify what difficulties did they have, when was it difficult for them, what do they think caused those difficulties. And then you can use those incorrect answers to kind of diagnose gaps in their skills or strategies and give them like short, very focused practice activities after the main listening to really focus on the things that they're having difficulty with. So that's my tip for today. Teach students how to listen, focus on learning to listen rather than listening to learn.